Unbelievable. The most luxurious jail in the world and its rich inmates. The party inside the walls. They called it the Weekend of Freedom. Music thundered, fireworks exploded, and women danced in glittering lights, all inside a Venezuelan prison. Guards watched from the gates. The inmates were throwing a party for themselves. It was a humid Saturday night in Margarita Island's San Antonio prison. From the air, it looked like any other penitentiary: concrete walls, guard towers, and barbed wire glinting under the Caribbean moon. But inside, there was bass vibrating through the walls. Reggaeton beats echoed across cell blocks once built to hold cartel enforcers and corrupt officials. By midnight, the place had turned into a nightclub. Hundreds of inmates moved to the rhythm beneath multicolored lights strung between balconies. Someone had smuggled in sound systems the size of refrigerators. Another brought in beer, rum, and cases of champagne. Firecrackers cracked in the yard like celebratory gunshots. And in the middle of it all, standing on a small platform, was a man named Teofilo Rodriguez Cardenas, known to everyone as El Pran. He wasn't the warden. He wasn't even a guard. He was an inmate, but in San Antonio prison, that didn't matter. For years, he had run the facility like a private kingdom, complete with his own bodyguards, accountants, and rules. According to reports from Venezuelan newspapers and human rights observers, Rodriguez Cardenas had seized control after a deadly riot in 2009 that left multiple officers dead. When the government retreated, he filled the power vacuum. The armed inmates called him Pran, short for Pranero, the undisputed boss of the cell block. Soon, every prisoner paid taxes to him, for food, for security, for a bed. Even visiting relatives had to pass through his men. As the music pulsed, Cardenas lifted a golden bottle and shouted, "We live better than those outside." A roar of laughter followed. In some ways, he wasn't lying. Behind the main yard were private suites built from repurposed offices, tiled floors, plasma TVs, king-size beds, and minibars. Photographs later leaked to local media showed inmates posing shirtless beside swimming pools and expensive motorcycles, inside prison grounds. When questioned, government officials called the images unverified. But Venezuelans had already seen enough to believe them. The luxury didn't end with furniture. Cardenas had installed a small zoo, yes, a zoo, complete with flamingos and macaws. There were dogs, roosters for fighting, and exotic birds imported through bribed guards. It became a twisted symbol of freedom inside captivity. Money bought everything in San Antonio. If an inmate wanted a cell with air conditioning, he paid. If he wanted privacy, he paid more. According to investigative journalists from El Universal and La Patilla, smuggled cash circulated openly. A parallel economy inside the prison, backed by guns and loyalty. Outside the walls, families waited in endless queues to deliver food. Inside, select prisoners dined on seafood and imported whiskey. The contrast mirrored Venezuela itself, a country of oil riches and food shortages, of elites and forgotten poor. The rise of the Pran system. To understand how a jail could transform into a palace, we need to go back to the 1990s. That's when Venezuela's overcrowded prisons became laboratories of chaos. Underpaid guards, outdated facilities, and political neglect allowed inmates to self-govern in exchange for stability. The Ministry of Justice looked away as long as riots stayed under control. But inside, control shifted to the most violent and well-funded gangs. They called themselves Prans, and their followers enforced an internal constitution. One rule: loyalty to the Pran above all. Another: outsiders, including guards, must seek permission to enter certain blocks. In some facilities, Prans even decided who lived or died. By the time Rodriguez Cardenas rose in San Antonio, the system had matured into a dark mirror of society. He collected taxes, paid guards for cooperation, and brokered peace among rival gangs. He even built a chapel inside the yard, not out of faith, but reputation. When reporters asked a released inmate how such a place could exist, the men replied, "Because money builds stronger walls than the government." Inside the Weekend of Freedom. According to news footage recorded in 2012, the party that made San Antonio infamous wasn't the first, but it was the grandest. Hundreds of guests from outside, relatives, girlfriends, musicians, entered freely. They brought instruments, drinks, and cell phones. Videos uploaded to social media showed men waving pistols while dancing. One clip, later cited by international outlets, revealed inmates firing rifles into the air in celebration. It was both carnival and warning. A celebration of power, and a message that the state had none. Human rights activists later said it was a predictable disaster. Years of corruption had allowed such autonomy to flourish. Guards were outnumbered, often 30-1. Many accepted tips to look away. For them, survival meant cooperation. When journalists arrived at the gates after the video went viral, prison officials downplayed the footage as a cultural event. But behind the scenes, the Ministry of Interior had already ordered a covert investigation. Whispers spread that Rodriguez Cardenas' days were numbered. Power, loyalty, and blood. Luxury inside San Antonio wasn't merely decoration, it was control. Every bottle of rum and ounce of cocaine represented tribute. Each tattooed enforcer around El Pran served as both guard and hitman. If an inmate violated internal law, punishment was swift. According to one report from the Venezuelan Prison Observatory, bodies were often buried in secret pits within the compound. Official numbers rarely matched reality. But the paradox was clear: for many inmates, life under El Pran felt safer than in other prisons. There was food, music, and a strange order, as long as you obeyed. It was the twisted comfort of dictatorship. Rodriguez Cardenas even organized sports tournaments, charity drives for local children, and religious festivals. He invited photographers to document them, claiming he was bringing peace through leadership. Some local papers treated him like a folk hero, others called him a symptom of a broken system. The fall of a king. In 2012, everything collapsed in one deafening night. Government forces launched Operation Libertad, a nationwide crackdown on inmate-run prisons. At dawn, armored vehicles surrounded San Antonio. Loudspeakers ordered everyone to surrender. Inside, El Pran refused. Witnesses said he stood in the yard, surrounded by his men, holding a pistol in each hand. He shouted that no one would take his kingdom. The shootout lasted hours. When the smoke cleared, Teofilo Rodriguez Cardenas was dead, shot through the head. Officials later claimed they had restored order. But what they found shocked even hardened soldiers: a warehouse filled with rifles, grenades, luxury cars, and stacks of cash. Some cells had mirrored ceilings, others jacuzzi tubs. The luxury prison had been real all along. Photographs leaked to BBC Mundo and Reuters confirmed what rumors had long suggested. Images showed courtyards with swimming pools, murals of saints and naked women, and inmates' children playing near armed guards. The world watched in disbelief as the line between captivity and privilege blurred beyond recognition. Luxury as control. What happened at San Antonio was not an isolated case. Across Latin America, similar stories emerged. At La Modelo prison in Colombia, gang bosses enjoyed access to prostitutes, cell phones, and imported liquor. In El Salvador, before President Bukele's crackdown, jailed gang leaders operated extortion networks via smuggled smartphones. And in Honduras's Tamara prison, an entire wing was later found equipped with air conditioners and flat-screen TVs reserved for favored inmates. But San Antonio stood apart for its openness. It was a living metaphor, a country within a country, ruled by a man behind bars. Sociologists later called it carceral inversion, the point where inmates possess more real power than their keepers. In such places, luxury becomes currency, not for comfort, but for dominance. Those who could pay lived in relative peace. Those who couldn't became servants, guards, or statistics. When the government finally demolished the prison in 2014, officials vowed, never again. Yet corruption and inequality remained untouched, merely relocated. Echoes beyond Venezuela. As images of San Antonio's opulence spread, viewers around the world reacted with disbelief. Could a prison truly have swimming pools, music, and armed parties? For many Westerners, it seemed surreal. But experts pointed out that luxury behind bars isn't limited to the global south. In Indonesia, a 2010 investigation by Tempo magazine exposed Cipinang prison's VIP cells. Wealthy inmates, including businessmen convicted of corruption, enjoyed air conditioning, Wi-Fi, catered meals, and private visitors' suites. The warden later admitted to accepting bribes. When photos surfaced online, public outrage forced a brief cleanup, before things quietly returned to normal. In the Philippines, the 2014 Bilibid VIP scandal shocked the nation. Police raiding the new Bilibid prison discovered jacuzzis, recording studios, plasma TVs, and even a small concert hall built by drug lords inside the maximum security compound. The scandal prompted resignations and hearings, yet similar privileges resurfaced within years. And then there's Norway's Halden Fengsel, often called the world's most humane prison. Unlike San Antonio or Bilibid, Halden's luxury is intentional, not corrupt. Opened in 2010, it offers spacious rooms, art studios, and music labs. Its philosophy, rehabilitation through dignity. Yet critics worldwide question whether such comfort dilutes justice. The debate between compassion and inequality remains unresolved. When comfort becomes corruption. The images of San Antonio's parties haunt public memory because they reveal something deeper than excess. They expose the fragility of justice when wealth, fear, and neglect collide. For every Halden built to heal, there's a San Antonio built to deceive, proof that luxury, without accountability, turns to rot. When interviewed after the raid, a former guard whispered to a reporter, "We stopped being the jailers long ago. They were the ones who allowed us to live." That single sentence captured the tragedy of the luxury prison phenomenon. It isn't about gold watches or swimming pools. It's about a system so eroded that crime buys comfort, and justice can be rented by the night. As dawn broke over Margarita Island after El Pran's death, soldiers lowered the national flag over the ruined compound. Stray dogs wandered through shattered glass and empty bottles. The pool water shimmered under the morning sun, a final reflection of a kingdom that had collapsed under its own indulgence. A journalist standing at the gate scribbled in her notebook. This was not a prison. It was a mirror. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth, because what reflected in that mirror wasn't just corruption behind bars. It was the reflection of a society where money can turn punishment into privilege. The global pattern of luxury behind bars. When the images from San Antonio prison spread online, the world gasped. And then quietly realized it wasn't alone. From Asia to Europe, luxury behind bars had many names, many flags, and one shared truth: money bends steel faster than violence. In Jakarta, Indonesia, a humid dawn settled over the sprawling compound of Cipinang prison. On paper, it was a correctional facility for narcotics and corruption offenders. In reality, it was a neighborhood with two faces, one of rusted gates and overcrowded cells, the other of polished tile floors, chandeliers, and espresso machines humming behind locked steel doors. A 2010 exposé by Tempo magazine would shatter that illusion of order. Reporters disguised as family visitors described a side of prison that felt more like a private club. They wrote of rooms with flat-screen televisions, air conditioning units, and imported rugs. Inmates who could afford it, mostly wealthy businessmen and political fixers, dined on restaurant-catered food delivered daily through bribed guards. Those without money slept 10 to a cell, sharing buckets of water and mold-covered walls. An inmate later told Compass TV, "We have two prisons here, one for the poor, and one for the rich. We only share the same address." That line would echo through Indonesia's justice system for years. The Hotel Cipinang scandal. The scandal erupted when a former warden, Yusman Idris, was accused of accepting bribes to create VIP cells for favored inmates. According to a 2010 report from Jakarta Globe, investigators found private refrigerators, karaoke sets, and even a small aquarium collection inside certain blocks. Each VIP cell cost up to $10,000 in renovation fees, paid in cash. The revelation shocked even a country familiar with graft. Television crews gathered outside the gates, capturing the contrast between visitors arriving with plastic bags of rice and others escorted by chauffeurs carrying boxes of pastries. Within weeks, the Justice Ministry suspended several officers. But, as one anti-corruption activist later said, "You can punish a few guards, but you can't jail the system." Behind every luxurious cell lay a hierarchy built on favors, not fear. Wealthy prisoners hired other inmates as cooks, cleaners, and messengers. Money replaced muscle. And while ordinary prisoners lined up for medical attention, the elites received visits from private doctors who entered without inspection. A recurring name surfaced in leaked documents: Artalida Suryani, a businesswoman convicted in a major corruption case. According to Tempo's hidden camera footage, her cell resembled a small studio apartment, white curtains, leather couch, and personal assistant. She told investigators she only wanted clean air. Her definition of clean came with an air conditioner, cable TV, and catered meals. The public called it Hotel Cipinang. Power, culture, and the price of confinement. Why do such systems survive? Sociologists in Jakarta pointed to a cultural paradox. Prison in many developing nations is not an institution of rehabilitation but a marketplace of survival. Underpaid guards rely on bribes, administrators fear riots, politicians prefer silence. Luxury cells, then, become insurance, a way to keep the powerful quiet, the poor subdued, and the statistics neat. When questioned before Parliament, one official said bluntly, "As long as the rich stay peaceful, we can manage the rest." That statement, broadcast live, triggered outrage. Editorials compared Cipinang to a five-star hotel funded by inequality. But the outrage faded as fast as it rose. By 2013, another audit found the same irregularities, the same hidden air conditioners, and the same silence. From Jakarta to Manila, the Bilibid revelations. If Cipinang represented quiet corruption, the New Bilibid prison in the Philippines was its loud, glittering cousin. Located just south of Manila, Bilibid is one of Southeast Asia's largest maximum security facilities, home to thousands of inmates, including drug lords, gang leaders, and politicians fallen from grace. In 2014, the Philippine National Police launched an unannounced raid. What they discovered would redefine the meaning of luxury prison. Behind reinforced gates, officers found an entire village of privilege. There were air-conditioned suites with jacuzzis and waterbeds. Recording studios complete with electric guitars and mixers. A small concert hall used for inmate parties. Dozens of flat-screen TVs mounted on polished walls. And hidden inside one suite, a cache of automatic weapons, cash, and designer bags. Television coverage of the raid played like reality TV. Viewers watched as officers opened doors to rooms decorated with chandeliers and life-size statues of saints. They found sex toys, imported liquor, and pet pythons used as status symbols. One cell even had a home theater system connected to a satellite dish on the roof. According to Justice Secretary Leila de Lima, who led the operation. This is no longer a prison, it's a resort for the rich and powerful. The revelations dominated headlines. Talk shows dissected the morality of comfort for criminals. But beneath the spectacle lay a disturbing truth: these luxuries existed not because the system failed, but because it worked, for those who could pay. The economy of privilege. Former guards testified that VIP inmates paid monthly security contributions. In exchange, they received unrestricted phone use, room service, and protection. One officer told ABS-CBN News, "We didn't guard them, we served them. They paid our salaries better than the government." The New Bilibid scandal exposed how deeply corruption had penetrated daily life. During the investigation, officials uncovered financial ledgers documenting millions in illegal profits circulating within the prison. Every item, from light bulbs to gym equipment, had a price tag in pesos. For ordinary prisoners, this economy was invisible yet suffocating. They cooked meals for VIP rooms, cleaned jacuzzis they would never touch, and acted as human couriers carrying food and money across blocks. Inside the world's most overcrowded prisons, luxury was built on someone else's hunger. When the cameras leave. After months of hearings, the Philippine government transferred key inmates and replaced senior wardens. For a while, Bilibid quieted. But journalists returning years later found the same patterns, smaller in scale, but alive. The new reforms had patched the walls, not the foundation. A criminologist at the University of the Philippines explained it simply. As long as inequality exists outside, it will reproduce itself inside. It wasn't just a Filipino problem. It was a mirror reflecting global justice, where the rich experience rehabilitation, and the poor endure punishment. Luxury in the West, reform or privilege. To contrast the chaos of Bilibid, many Western documentaries often highlight Norway's Halden Fengsel, called the world's most humane prison. But the line between humane and luxurious is thinner than it seems. Halden's grey brick walls hide art-filled interiors. Cells have private bathrooms, mini fridges, and windows without bars. Inmates cook their own meals, attend music workshops, and record in professional studios. Guards share coffee breaks with prisoners to build trust. To some, it's a triumph of Nordic compassion. To others, it's the velvet glove of privilege. Critics in the US and UK call it justice by IKEA. They argue that such comfort insults victims and erodes deterrence. Norwegian officials counter that the system's success speaks for itself, one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world. A 2017 report by The Guardian noted that Norway spends about $90,000 per inmate per year, nearly triple the European average. Supporters claim it's cheaper than repeated imprisonment. Skeptics call it social engineering in silk sheets. What unites Halden with places like San Antonio and Bilibid is not corruption but philosophy, the belief that prison can mirror society's values, whether noble or rotten. The Western paradox. In the United States, luxury takes a different form: pay-to-stay programs. Since the 1990s, several county jails in California, Washington, and Ohio have offered inmates the option to upgrade to cleaner cells for daily fees ranging from $75 to $150. Participants include white-collar offenders convicted of DUIs or fraud. A 2017 NBC News investigation into the Santa Ana City Jail revealed cells with private TVs, personal bedding, and weekend passes for work release. Critics called it class segregation behind bars. Officials argued it relieved overcrowding and generated revenue. In Beverly Hills, one wealthy businessman reportedly bragged to Los Angeles Magazine that his 10-day sentence felt like a weird business retreat. He had a single cell, phone privileges, and take-out meals delivered nightly. He described the experience as inconvenient, not punishing. Contrast that with California state penitentiaries, where overcrowded dorms hold triple capacity and temperatures soar above 100 degrees. Luxury, it seems, is simply another tier in America's justice market. Europe's gray zone. Across Europe, similar divides emerge under the language of humanitarian design. In Austria, Leoben Justice Center features pastel walls and glass balconies. In Germany, Heidering Prison offers woodworking shops and sunlit rooms. Officials insist such environments promote dignity. Yet public reactions mirror those in Latin America: disbelief, then debate. In 2015, a British tabloid splashed headlines reading, "Criminals live better than our soldiers," after images of Halden circulated online. The outrage was cultural, not logistical, a society's instinct that punishment must feel like pain. But beneath the outrage lies an uncomfortable truth: humane prisons cost money, and in unequal systems, money always chooses who benefits first. Where transparency exists, luxury can be justice. Where corruption reigns, it becomes extortion. From cells to symbols. By the 2020s, documentaries began calling these facilities two sides of the same coin. One side, Norway's Halden Fengsel, represents deliberate compassion. The other, Venezuela's San Antonio or the Philippines Bilibid, represents deliberate neglect. Both reveal how the meaning of luxury in confinement depends on who controls it. For sociologists, these prisons act as social mirrors. They reflect inequality more vividly than any courtroom. They expose a system where guilt and wealth negotiate punishment like a contract. A UN Special Rapporteur on Torture summarized it in a 2019 address. When material privilege determines the severity of a sentence, justice is no longer blind, it's on payroll. The unseen victims. Lost beneath the spectacle of marble floors and jacuzzis are the stories of those forgotten, the ordinary inmates living inches away from luxury they can never touch. In Cipinang, prisoners in the general ward call themselves the shadows. They clean, cook, and guard for the elites, often for a bowl of rice. In Bilibid, they sleep in stairwells while VIP inmates film music videos. In Venezuela, they bury the dead from riots triggered by envy. One former Indonesian prisoner told Human Rights Watch that his daily view was a cell glowing with blue TV light while we sat in darkness. He added, that light was hope and anger at the same time. These testimonies remind viewers that luxury prisons are not just about comfort, they're about contrast. And contrast breeds despair. The return of El Pran's lesson. Back in Venezuela, years after San Antonio's demolition, a new penitentiary system promised reform. Yet satellite images showed similar, autonomous zones, emerging under different names. Once power tastes money, it doesn't die, it relocates. The lesson travels well. From Jakarta to Oslo, Manila to California, every nation faces the same choice. Will prisons mirror justice or reproduce inequality? The question lingers because both sides claim morality. Human rights defenders insist dignity prevents violence. Victims' families argue comfort erases accountability. Governments juggle both, and often drop them. A world divided by bars and balance sheets. Step back and the pattern becomes mathematical. Where GDP is low and corruption high, luxury behind bars grows through bribery. Where GDP is high and transparency strong, luxury grows through policy. In both cases, comfort flows upward. The difference lies in the justification. San Antonio's pools existed because guards were terrified. Cipinang's suites existed because wardens were greedy. Halden's studios exist because lawmakers believe empathy works. But the visual, men behind glass enjoying what the free world envies, always sparks the same reaction, disbelief followed by resentment. The next frontier, digital privilege. In the 2020s, a new form of luxury emerged, digital freedom. Smuggled smartphones, VPNs, and online businesses turned certain inmates into remote entrepreneurs. In the Philippines, investigators found drug lords managing crypto wallets from their suites. In Indonesia, online gambling rings operated from within prison walls, supervised by guards on payroll. Luxury, once measured in comfort, evolved into connectivity. Meanwhile, poorer inmates were banned from even touching a radio. The gap widened beyond mattresses and meals, it became a technological divide. Governments began installing signal jammers, but corruption adapted faster than technology. In one leaked message chain, an inmate boasted, "We have better Wi-Fi than the police station." That line summed up the era perfectly. Echoes of morality. Every civilization defines justice through its prisons. The Roman Empire built arenas for punishment. The Middle Ages built dungeons for silence. The modern world builds facilities that look like hotels, or hide horrors behind marble walls. Luxury prisons are neither myth nor miracle. They're the mirror of our contradictions, compassion versus corruption, reform versus indulgence. For the powerful, they promise dignity. For the powerless, they prove inequality. For society, they pose an uncomfortable question: what does it really mean to pay for one's crimes? In a courtroom, justice wears a blindfold. In a luxury prison, it wears designer shades. The difference is not irony, it's evidence. As global audiences scroll through viral clips of San Antonio's parties or Bilibid's jacuzzis, outrage fuels curiosity but rarely change. Because beyond the shock lies something darker, the understanding that if money can buy comfort in the world's harshest places, it can buy almost anything anywhere. The Western illusion of justice. They say the West perfected fairness. Clean courts, transparent systems, equal rights before the law. But behind the steel doors of America's jails and Europe's privatized facilities, another reality hums quietly, one where money still shapes the experience of punishment, only dressed in legality. The story begins not with gang lords or drug barons, but with accountants, lawyers, and executives, men and women who commit crimes of privilege. The American upgrade. In Los Angeles County, the heat shimmers across the concrete walls of the Santa Ana City Jail. It looks ordinary from the outside, a mid-sized facility with 10 walls and a tired flag. Inside, though, there's a different kind of booking list, those who can pay to stay. For a daily fee, anywhere between $75 and $150, nonviolent offenders can buy their way into cleaner, quieter quarters. It's called the Pay-to-Stay program. Officially, it's designed to ease overcrowding. Unofficially, it's a velvet rope line between rich and poor convicts. A 2017 NBC News investigation showed that these inmates could bring laptops, watch television, and order takeout. Some even left during the day for work, returning to serve their sentence at night, a penal version of Airbnb. The deputy warden defended the program, saying, "It's not luxury. It's accountability with comfort." But that phrase, accountability with comfort, felt like satire to millions of Americans watching footage of white-collar offenders eating sushi behind polished bars while others in state prisons fought over space on concrete floors. The business of incarceration. In the 1980s, the U.S. began outsourcing imprisonment. What started as a temporary solution became a multi-billion-dollar industry. Today, two major corporations, CoreCivic and GEO Group, run dozens of facilities across the country. Together they earn over $4 billion a year, housing roughly 8% of all American inmates. On paper, they promise efficiency. In reality, critics argue they profit from keeping people inside longer. A 2020 report by the U.S. Department of Justice Inspector General found evidence that private prisons cut medical budgets, limited food portions, and lobbied against sentencing reform. The less rehabilitation, the more repeat business. Every cell became an invoice. In an interview with The Nation, a former GEO Group accountant said, "The company motto was safety, security, savings. But the only S that mattered was shareholders. Justice for sale. To the public, private prisons look sterile, polished floors, fluorescent lights, rows of beds. Yet deep inside, another market thrives: premium services. Phone privileges, commissary goods, visitation schedules, all come at a price. In Texas, a packet of ramen costs more than $1, a small fortune for inmates earning pennies an hour. Those with outside money load prepaid cards, those without barter for crumbs." A sociologist from the University of California calls it capitalism behind bars. When everything becomes purchasable, food, safety, time, poverty becomes another sentence. Across the ocean, Europe isn't immune. Britain's experiment. In 1992, the United Kingdom became the first European nation to privatize an entire prison, HMP Wolds. Run by the company G4S, it promised innovation and transparency. Instead, it became a headline factory for scandal. Inmates leaked photos of buffet-style meals, gaming consoles, and cozy rooms. Newspapers screamed, "Hotel HMP." Government inspectors later confirmed that certain prisoners enjoyed unsanctioned privileges, not through bribery, but bureaucratic neglect. By 2013, the British Parliament began questioning whether profit and punishment could ever coexist. An inquiry revealed that private contractors routinely overcharged the state while cutting staff. Violence rose 40%. And yet, investors kept smiling. A Guardian columnist summed it up. "We sold justice to the lowest bidder, and now it behaves like one." Europe's quiet comfort. Continental Europe prefers subtlety. In Switzerland, select cantons operate open prisons, where low-risk inmates live in dormitories, work outside, and return by nightfall. In Finland, open institutions like Kerava feature communal kitchens and shared gardens. Officials call them pre-release programs. Critics call them weekend camps. The distinction matters. Unlike Cipinang or Bilibid, these comforts are deliberate policy, a belief that respect breeds reform. And statistically, it works. Finland's recidivism rate hovers near 30%, half that of the US. Still, the optics cause friction. When photos of Kerava's inmates grilling outdoors went viral in 2021, a British tabloid fumed. Killers enjoy barbecues as victims suffer. Justice, it seems, isn't only a legal system, it's a national emotion. The luxury of isolation. In the United States, while some offenders buy comfort, others buy silence. High-profile inmates, from Ponzi schemers to corrupt governors, often request solitary units for safety. These units, though smaller, offer privacy unimaginable to ordinary convicts. One former prison consultant, quoted by Bloomberg, admitted he arranged quiet custody deals for wealthy clients. Private cells, extra guards, controlled media exposure. He called it risk management. Most people would call it inequality. The most infamous example emerged in 2009 when financier Bernard Madoff entered the Butner Federal Correctional Complex. While not officially privileged, Madoff received an unusual degree of autonomy, partly due to age and notoriety. Fellow inmates nicknamed his unit Camp Richmond. A New York Times profile described him jogging each morning, reading Forbes, and mentoring younger white-collar offenders in finance. He once joked, "I ran a billion-dollar firm. Now I run the library." Even in disgrace, hierarchy persisted. The price of redemption. The Western world defends such differences under one word: rehabilitation. But rehabilitation has a price tag. Therapy sessions, education programs, vocational training, all require funding. In nations where social safety nets already stretch thin, those programs often favor inmates who can contribute back through influence or media attention. In California, actors, and athletes convicted of misdemeanors frequently receive offers to speak to youth as part of community service. Poorer offenders mop highways. Same sentence, different symbolism. Across Europe, high-profile cases receive bespoke treatment under public interest. When France jailed politician Jérôme Cahuzac for tax fraud in 2018, he served his term in a semi-open facility near the Pyrenees, a converted monastery with gardens and mountain views. Officials said it suited his health. Critics called it hypocrisy. The invisible rich. For every luxury scandal that reaches headlines, dozens remain hidden behind privacy laws. Western inmates with resources hire reputation managers, publicists, and legal teams to suppress details. In Germany, defamation laws prevent the publication of prisoner photos without consent. In Britain, certain high-profile convicts successfully argued that releasing their prison conditions would endanger them, a paradox of transparency. Meanwhile, impoverished inmates become public spectacle, their mugshots plastered across tabloids. Luxury buys not only comfort, but invisibility. A criminologist from King's College London wrote in the Lancet Criminal Review, "The final privilege of wealth is to suffer unseen. When justice becomes optics. The Western illusion thrives on imagery. While Bilibid flaunted jacuzzis, Western systems flaunt paperwork, committees, oversight, ethical codes. Yet the results align, different wrapping, same divide. Consider America's bail system. Before trial, freedom often depends on cash. Each year, thousands of defendants sit in jail for minor charges simply because they can't pay bail. Meanwhile, affluent suspects walk out hours after arrest. In 2019, a Harvard Law Review study found that defendants who post bail are 70% less likely to be convicted. Not because they're innocent, but because they can prepare a defense outside. That's the real luxury, time and access. It's not the champagne of San Antonio, but it's the same principle, justice calibrated by bank account. The cultural mask. When Western documentaries contrast themselves with corrupt prisons abroad, they miss the mirror. In Venezuela, corruption buys pools. In America, it buys attorneys. In Norway, it buys design. Different currencies, same transaction. The U.S. prides itself on due process, yet its prison conditions range from the humane to the medieval. Inmates in the federal system report mold, heat exhaustion, and medical neglect. Yet others, in county facilities or minimum security camps, have libraries, recreation, and access to email. It's not that the system doesn't work, it works as intended, tiered by class, codified by law. A moment of reckoning. The 2020 pandemic exposed the gap with brutal clarity. When COVID-19 swept through prisons, wealth dictated survival. Private facilities secured vaccines and sanitation first. Public prisons languished. Inmates with money hired lawyers to argue for home confinement. Poorer ones died in crowded dorms. An Associated Press analysis later confirmed a staggering disparity. Inmates from high-income zip codes were 5 times more likely to receive compassionate release. In other words, even mercy had a price. Europe's guilt complex. In Scandinavia, the pendulum swung the other way. After years of being hailed as a model of humane incarceration, Norway and Sweden began facing backlash from their own citizens. Victims' families argued that ultra-comfortable prisons devalued suffering. A 2021 poll showed 58% of Norwegians felt Halden's conditions were too soft. The government responded by tightening eligibility for its open cell programs. Yet officials remain firm. Halden's director told BBC News, "We build the kind of prison we'd want for our children, because someday, someone's child will be here." That moral clarity stands in stark contrast to countries where luxury stems from corruption. But to the average viewer scrolling social media, the image is the same: inmates smiling, cooking, watching television. Context rarely survives a caption. Technology and control. The next frontier in Western incarceration is digital. Tablets, monitored emails, video calls, technologies sold as modernization. But in private facilities, these often come through for-profit vendors charging exorbitant fees. A 10-minute video call can cost $10. Streaming music $1 per song. Education courses subscription-based. In 2022, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission fined several providers for overcharging inmates. Still, the practice continues. Luxury becomes not silence or sushi, but connection, the ability to speak to family without debt. An activist from the Prison Policy Initiative summed it up. Freedom isn't just outside the walls. Inside, it's sold by the minute. The Western Mirror. So what does the West see when it looks at San Antonio's pools or Bilibid's chandeliers? A scandal, yes. But also a reflection. For every flamboyant, flaunting champagne, there's a hedge fund felon sleeping under clean sheets. Both exist because justice is elastic. The difference is branding. One calls it corruption, the other calls it policy. But morality doesn't care about semantics. A jacuzzi in Manila and a pay-to-stay cell in Santa Ana share the same DNA, a belief that punishment can be adjusted to income. A voice from within. In 2022, an anonymous letter circulated through Reddit's r/xcons forum. The author claimed to be a former accountant who served 8 months in a California self-pay jail. He wrote, "I watched the guys in the main block eat powdered eggs and sleep on metal. I had Wi-Fi, Netflix, and a private bathroom. Every night, I told myself I deserved it because I worked hard my whole life. Then I realized that's what everyone says, the guards, the politicians, the CEOs, we deserve it. Maybe that's the real prison." The post went viral. Thousands commented, not out of sympathy, but recognition. Because beneath systems, buildings, and slogans lies the same human reflex, to justify comfort while others suffer. Erosion of faith. Public trust in Western justice has quietly decayed. A 2023 Pew Research Center survey found that 61% of Americans believe wealth strongly influences sentencing outcomes. In Britain, that number climbs to 74%. The myth of blind justice survives only in statues. And yet, governments continue funding private facilities and optional programs, convinced that efficiency equals morality. They measure success in cost savings, not conscience. But conscience always collects interest. As the chapter closes, picture 2 cells, one in Oslo, one in Ohio. Both clean, both safe. In one, comfort is compassion. In the other, comfort is commerce. Different motives, same material, wood floors, bright light, silence. The illusion of justice lies not in who suffers more, but in who chooses what suffering means. Reflection. The story of luxury prisons isn't about comfort, it's about control, who has it, who loses it, and who can buy it back. From Caracas to California, the architecture changes, the currency changes, but the transaction stays the same. Behind every polished surface is the oldest human equation. Power equals money plus immunity. In prisons, that equation becomes literal. It decides who eats, who sleeps, and who learns from their mistakes. Justice, they say, should be blind. But in the Western world, she merely wears better makeup. The future of punishment, luxury or justice. The world is changing faster than its walls can keep up. Prisons, once symbols of control and fear, are becoming test grounds for profit, technology, and public conscience. And the question hanging over every nation is no longer how to punish, but what punishment even means in an age where comfort, connectivity, and image define everything. From bars to brands. In 2025, a startup in California announced what it called smart incarceration. It wasn't a prison, but a network of monitored homes, equipped with biometric locks, 24-hour cameras, and AI-driven behavior tracking. The company pitched it as the humane alternative to confinement. Critics called it digital luxury for the privileged guilty. The model was simple: offenders paid a subscription fee to serve their sentences at home under constant surveillance. The rich could afford discretion and stability, the poor still faced overcrowded cells. Justice, once physical, had become programmable. A reporter from Wired summed it up. In the future, incarceration may look less like Alcatraz and more like Netflix, tiered access, monthly payments, and premium plans for privacy. The joke wasn't far from truth. The rise of the prison tech industry. Across the globe, the prison industry has discovered its next gold rush: data. Electronic monitoring, predictive policing algorithms, and biometric ID systems promise efficiency but also open doors to unprecedented control. In the United States alone, electronic ankle monitors now track over 200,000 people, a number growing faster than traditional incarceration rates. Private vendors charge daily fees for the devices, effectively transferring the cost of punishment to the punished. For the wealthy, this shift is salvation, digital sentences instead of steel ones. For the poor, it's debt disguised as mercy. A man in Georgia told ProPublica he owed more after leaving jail than before entering, thanks to monitoring fees. They took the bars off my body, he said, but put them on my wallet. Technology hasn't freed people, it's privatized captivity. Europe's experiments in empathy. Meanwhile, Europe continues its quiet revolution in design. Architects in Denmark and the Netherlands are drafting open correctional villages, where inmates live in small communities, work real jobs, and vote in internal councils. These facilities look like suburban neighborhoods, bike paths, glass kitchens, soft colors. They are built on the belief that dignity reduces danger. Halden Fengsel in Norway remains the benchmark. It now offers digital classrooms, therapy podcasts, and 3D printing labs for skill training. But for all its innovation, it faces an unexpected crisis: envy. Footage of inmates painting in sunlit studios continues to spark online outrage. Viewers see comfort, not correction. A crime victim's father told Aftenposten, "My son is in the ground. His killer gets art lessons." That quote reverberated across parliaments and comment sections alike, reigniting the old war between vengeance and virtue. Asia's new order. While Europe experiments with compassion, Asia experiments with control. China's Smart Prison initiative uses AI-powered cameras to monitor inmate behavior in real time. Officials boast that algorithms can predict violence before it happens. In Japan, biometric entry systems record every movement, ensuring perfect order. Supporters call it modernization. Critics call it mechanical obedience. And yet, even in authoritarian systems, luxury sneaks in, just differently. Wealthy inmates in certain Chinese provinces reportedly enjoy private medical wards and family visitation rooms with plush furniture. Privilege adapts to every ideology. In India, several state jails introduced paid cells in 2023, offering inmates cleaner facilities and special meals for daily fees equivalent to 2 weeks of average wages. Officials defended it as optional reform. The press called it justice with a menu. The psychology of comfort. Why does luxury in confinement provoke such fascination, or fury? Psychologists argue it's because prison represents society's boundary between morality and chaos. If that boundary softens, people fear meaning itself dissolves. A punishment without pain feels like injustice, yet pain without purpose breeds monsters. Dr. Karen Holt, a criminologist from the University of Manchester, describes it this way. The modern public doesn't want cruelty. They want symbolism, the sense that wrongs have weight. Luxury empties that symbol. That paradox haunts every reform movement. Governments crave positive headlines, citizens crave retribution. The result is hybrid systems, part hotel, part cage, each side claiming the moral high ground. The economics of mercy. There's another reason luxury prisons multiply: they're profitable. Private companies see opportunity where the state sees crisis. In Latin America, rehabilitation centers, financed by investors, now advertise comfort and safety for inmates who can pay monthly fees. In the United States, contractors market premium reentry programs, offering psychological counseling, private rooms, and post-release networking events. Justice has become a subscription model. Economists estimate that global correctional spending surpasses $200 billion annually. Every reform, digital or physical, creates new markets: cameras, uniforms, software, meals, construction. And wherever money flows, luxury follows. The result: the world's poorest commit crimes born of desperation, and their punishment funds the comfort of those who can afford reform. It's poetic, cruel, and mathematically efficient. From surveillance to simulation. In the coming decade, virtual reality sentencing may blur the line even further. Pilot projects in South Korea and Canada already use VR therapy to simulate freedom, empathy, or trauma management for inmates. Officials report reduced aggression and quicker rehabilitation. But philosophers warn of a darker possibility. If a criminal can feel remorse through simulation, one ethicist asked, does that mean punishment can be simulated too? Imagine serving 10 years inside a headset, compressed time, digital suffering, emotional reprogramming. Would that be progress or illusion? Luxury would no longer be physical, it would be emotional comfort, the ability to experience reform without enduring it. The new moral divide. The coming war isn't between comfort and cruelty, it's between visibility and invisibility. Poor prisons are public, their horrors filmed, protested, debated. Luxury prisons are hidden, protected by privacy laws, corporate contracts, or political discretion. Invisibility becomes the ultimate privilege. A leaked UN memo in 2024 warned that the global prison system risks dividing into two parallel realities, one transparent and punitive, one invisible and indulgent. It's already happening. Celebrities and elites serve quiet terms in private wings, out of sight and out of anger. Ordinary convicts become viral footage, mugshots, riots, despair. Justice isn't dying. It's being curated. When comfort crosses the line. Every so often, a case reminds the world that luxury can kill. In 2022, a Venezuelan investigative report revealed that one high-ranking inmate in the rebuilt Tocaron prison died of an overdose during an unauthorized party, eerily reminiscent of San Antonio's Weekend of Freedom. The footage, again, leaked online. Different faces, same music. As if history refused to learn. The following month, authorities demolished the prison's VIP pavilion. Inside they found golden watches, cell phones, and cash hidden behind religious icons. Nothing had changed, only the decor. Corruption doesn't fear reform, it adapts to its design. Rehabilitation or rebranding. Across the Western Hemisphere, politicians now speak of reimagining justice. Press releases use words like innovation, dignity, and sustainability. Yet behind the language lies the same tension: how to make prisons look humane without making punishment feel optional. Design firms compete to build green prisons powered by solar energy, with ergonomic furniture and art therapy spaces. Scandinavian concepts are exported to Canada, Germany, and even select US states. Architectural magazines feature them like luxury resorts. But former inmates offer sobering context. One Norwegian prisoner, interviewed after release, said, "The room was beautiful, but the silence was the same. Luxury doesn't heal guilt. It only hides it." The global backlash. As awareness grows, so does resentment. Online movements led by victims' rights groups challenge the optics of comfort. Hashtags like #JusticeNotSpa and #RealTimeForCrime trend whenever new, humane prisons open. Governments scramble to justify expenses. They release statistics showing reduced recidivism and improved safety, yet the public remains divided. In 2024, the UK cancelled a proposed, therapeutic correctional campus after tabloids mocked it as a £1 million retreat. In Brazil, activists protested a pilot luxury wing for white-collar offenders, calling it a crime against equality. Even in Norway, politicians face pressure to tighten eligibility for open prisons. Every innovation becomes a moral trial. The forgotten purpose. Somewhere amid the noise, the original purpose of imprisonment, protection, deterrence, and rehabilitation, gets lost. Instead of asking what works, societies ask what looks fair. Punishment becomes performance art. An American professor of law, writing in The Atlantic, framed it bluntly. "We don't design prisons to stop crime. We design them to manage outrage. Luxury and suffering are just two aesthetics competing for applause." Echoes of San Antonio. More than a decade after El Pran's fall, San Antonio prison still echoes through documentaries and debates. Its ruins, now overgrown, are visited by journalists searching for metaphors. Some say it proved corruption's reach. Others say it predicted the world's future, where every cell, poor or rich, becomes a stage. A former Venezuelan guard who once served under El Pran was interviewed last year. He said quietly, "The world laughed at us. But look now, every country has its San Antonio. They just paint it white." His words feel prophetic. The moral crossroads. Human civilization stands at a moral crossroads. Should punishment evolve with empathy, or will empathy become another mask for privilege? If justice is blind, who decides what she touches? Artificial intelligence can measure risk but not remorse. Architects can design comfort but not conscience. Politicians can promise reform but not integrity. And the public, divided between vengeance and virtue, keeps scrolling, liking, and forgetting. The future of punishment may not be cells or freedom, but attention. Who receives it, who controls it, and who fades into the algorithmic dark? The final reflection. Look again at the world map of prisons. In Venezuela, the pools are dry, but the power still shifts in whispers. In Indonesia, karaoke echoes behind new reform signs. In the Philippines, Bilibid has new walls but old secrets. In Norway, the gardens bloom in peace. In America, inmates check balances on digital tablets while investors track theirs on Wall Street. Different continents, same gravity, money pulls justice in its orbit. Perhaps the truest luxury isn't the champagne or the soft bed. It's the illusion of redemption purchased instead of earned. When history looks back at our era, it may not see cruelty or mercy, but confusion, a civilization that couldn't decide whether to heal or to hide. Because the question that began in the shadows of San Antonio still haunts every courtroom and corridor. When does luxury become injustice? And until the world can answer, every bar of gold inside a cell will gleam like a mirror, reflecting not the prisoner, but the society that built it. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. All factual references derive from publicly available reports by BBC News, Reuters, Wired, ProPublica, Tempo Magazine, The Guardian, The Atlantic, and official UN briefings.